everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of the Music Minds podcast. I'm Tony Fennell, and joining me as always is my co-host, John Stone. How are you, sir?
Hanging in there. How are you doing, Tony?
Not too bad, eh? Episode 4, huh? We're like an old married couple now, brother. Right. Well, today's episode is called Why to Go or Not to Go to Music School and What You Could Do Instead. All right. Well, should I go to music school? I've got my own opinion on that, mate. Here we go. I happen to think that pursuing a music degree is not the greatest idea. In my humble opinion, and it is humble, you don't need a music degree to make it big in music or any other part of the entertainment industry, to be honest. Look, I know there are great music colleges out there offering formal education in our field, but what's the point of a music degree? For me, the time and money it takes to pursue a music degree can be channeled into things that will help you propel your career. Also, the financial costs, mate, they're a huge risk. And this is heaped on you before you've even put yourself out there with the millions of other musicians looking for a break. A college degree from the average university may cost anything between $20,000 to $40,000. Keep in mind, this doesn't include money spent on housing, books, computers, software, instruments, and general expenses. Plus, if you get your degree from one of the bigger well-known universities, the costs may skyrocket to $200,000 or more. Look, Paul McCartney couldn't read a note, and he did all right for himself. Jay-Z and Hendrix made it with that music degree. So, John,
Right.
What are your thoughts, matey?
Yeah, I mean, it really kind of depends on what kind of music you're doing. I think there is a place for school for classical musicians. Certainly, you want to have that training and going to a school like Juilliard or Oberlin or one of the schools at one of the major universities that has a very well-respected orchestral program or in a performance for classical, that sort of thing. That can make sense because you're going to need that training. You're talking about really becoming a master of your instrument and your craft.
Yeah.
And classical music is classical music. It hasn't changed in hundreds of years, depending on what you're playing. Certainly, if you're playing Bach, it's the same as it's been since Bach was alive. So certainly for that regard, for that part of the industry, I do think there is room for continued education and really developing yourself as a classical performer. For popular music, even for jazz, for anything that is on the other side of the coin for that, absolutely. I really don't see it. To become a great performer is one thing. To become a great writer is another thing.
Yeah.
And 4-year or 2-year program to do those two things, I don't see where it's going to build your skill set. That stuff comes from inside. That is innate. That is stuff that you already have in you as the talent needs to be there. You can develop that on your own, even with private lessons or just sitting in your room and shredding, that sort of thing. So, and writing words, writing lyrics, that is a whole different animal that I'm not sure what school can offer you from that.
Right. And, if I could just touch again on student loans, an entry-level musician or a producer, let's face it, they're not going to make much cash in that first or even the second year. And a music graduate isn't likely to produce a hit song straight out of the box. This means you might end up with a student loan that you can't pay for, and then you turn into a defaulter. And as a defaulter, you've got to pay more money in fines and interest. In a nutshell, you're screwed. And as I said earlier, a career in the music business is tough enough without the financial pressure that comes with loans. And let's face it, I know you touched on the orchestral side. Music audiences are insanely diverse today. So if you're dreaming of making it in the music industry, you've got to embrace diversity and you've got to be as creative as possible. And that brings me back to the question, will you get that in the classroom? Because I can't see that coming.
No, I went to school for a liberal arts or a performing arts discipline, if you want to call it that. I was decidedly undisciplined. And, you were dealing with a lot of people. I mean, I went to a 4-year school. I studied something that I really had no business studying. I won't get into it, but...
Oh, let's get into it. What was it?
Oh, man. So I went to school for acting.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I did. And that really was not the right move in any way, shape, or form. But you wind up going there. You're put in with a whole bunch of other actors. Now, speaking for myself, but let's put it in the context of music. You're put in there with a lot of other performers. Everybody's competing. I was just this past weekend, I was with my father's side of my family. One of the cousins that I have, I was talking with him. He lives down in Texas, and his son goes to University of North Texas, which has a very, very good performance program, instrumental and vocal and such, band program and such. And his son is studying, and he's a junior, and he's in what he was calling the 2 o'clock class. And he's trying to get into the 1 o'clock class because the 1 o'clock class is the high roller types and such. But his son has already gotten an opportunity to go out and perform. He actually came to New York. There's a company down there that puts together bands, basically, to go out on tour or go out and do special events, that sort of thing. And they call from the university and the students there because they know they're good. And so he went out and he had his first experience, and I know you can tell stories for days on this, Tony. He went out and had his first experience going and performing. He came to New York. He played, I believe, at like some big fancy wedding. Yeah, he got $400. Hey, right? I mean, nothing to shake a stick at.
You know what?
Student,
that's great cash.
That's not bad for one performance, one weekend. But he was hearing back in 36 hours. And he told his dad, he said, man, I only got like 5 hours of sleep in that entire period of time. And his dad said, welcome to the show, son. If you want to do this. So I think he got a little bit of a taste. He's a trumpet player, and he got a little bit of a taste of what that life is going to be like. And when you think about it, when you're not talking about trying to become, the next first soloist for the New York Philharmonic or something like that. When you're talking about being a working musician that plays the bass or the guitar or the keys or whatnot, you don't have a lot of latitude as a performer if you're, not the best of the best. And the best of the best, frankly, don't need to go to a 4-year program or even a 2-year program. I think we were making this joke the other day, Tony. The best ones are the ones that go for a year and drop out.
Yeah, right? Mate, that's a really good point. I mean, what do they teach at music school? I guess composing, playing instruments, music. Do they teach the business of the music business at school? And that's we touched on that a few times. I guess stage and theatrical vocalization, maybe a bit of production, maybe, but the big one, and you want to enforce this, is learning the business that is music.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had said this a long time ago. I think they've now started to integrate a lot more of that into the core programs that they have at these schools, especially at Berklee and those types. But absolutely, the first year, if you're not practicing your horn or your instrument, you're in a business class. And that business class is not, I have to learn spreadsheets and Excel and all that crap. It's learning the music business, because no matter what you do, if you're just a straight performer, if you're writing, if you're trying to become a writer and a composer and that sort, all of that, you've got to learn. And we've talked about this now, I think 3 episodes in a row. You got to know your rights. You got to know what you bring to the table and what you can get in compensation for that, all of that sort of thing. And that comes from a music business education. And you got to give those kids at least a first year of that, because otherwise, if you walk out there and go, oh, okay, well, yeah, I guess it's all right for me to do this, and I'm going to play on this recording, and oh geez, I didn't realize I had to be a part of the union to do this, or although believe me, they'll tell you very quickly, the AFM, the American Federation of Musicians, but you don't realize, I'm just getting paid for this, and I wound up writing a little bit of this or helping them arrange it and stuff, but they paid me a flat fee and that's it and I'm done. There are ways that you could say, well, wait a minute, if I'm going to be more involved in the actual creation of this composition or whatever this piece is that we're writing and creating here, wait, I might be able to be entitled to a little bit of a share of the copyright on that or something. So you got to know your rights before you go into any situation, even just as a straight performer, because you never know what your contribution is going to turn into part of the final product.
Well, no, I totally agree. And back to this music business, I mean, turning up and doing sessions, that's a tough road. I mean, I'll actually get into that in a few minutes, but it's interesting to me that the guys who can and can't read sheet music, because really that's what you're going to music school for. You are going to learn some of the business. Yes, you're going to learn a little bit more about your instrument, but they want you reading the dots. And here's a few that can't read the dots. Lionel Richie. Now, he wrote a few hits.
I think so.
Slash from Guns N' Roses. I think he's done okay.
I think he's done all right.
Eric Clapton. Not too bad.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's a great quote from Dave Grohl. He's one of those guys. He went, "I was never taught how to play the guitar." He was telling Rolling Stone this. "I don't even know the chords to ever long. I only know what happens when I put my fingers there. But the riff's a good example of how I look at the guitar." So basically, he kind of plays like I play. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And, and I can remember crapping myself the first time I did a session in New York. And basically I was winging it like a lunatic, and I went home and thought, oh boy, I'm done for. But they liked my feel, and then I learned the magic of tabbing it out. And for those of you that don't understand tabbing, it's basically asking what the chords are and then writing them, in text. E, B minor, G. Even then I was still playing by ear, but I had a sense of where the song was going and what chord was coming next. It was pretty scary stuff, mate. There's a lot of people that can read, and I will get into a little bit of that if you don't mind.
Of course.
There's an example for you. I remember doing a lot of commercials back in the day, and it's how I made money. And there was a fantastic guitar player that could honestly play every style, there wasn't a chord he couldn't play, this kid. And eventually he said to me one day, he said, "Do you want to hear some of my stuff?" And I went, "Oh yeah, sure." Oh my word. I mean, shockingly bad is an understatement. Now, the songs made no sense because it was almost as if he was terrified to use a regular D or a G. You know why? Because Berklee had beaten those out of him.
Yes.
Now, maybe that's changed now. I don't know. But that was my experience. And I can't help but feel that, honestly, this guy was phenomenal, and he's actually gone on to play with some massive artists as well.
Yeah.
But his songwriting was shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, and I happen to believe that was basically forced upon him at school.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I mean, when I was doing it back in the day, back in the early 90s, we would be, this was the day when you put an ad in the back of the Village Voice here in New York when you were looking for, a bass player or a keyboard player or whatever. And believe me, it was hard enough to keep a bass player, let alone try to get a keyboard player. That was like caviar. Okay?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
We can't afford a keyboard player, but just to get a bass player, a competent one, and we used to make jokes and say, "Oh boy, here comes another Berklee baby," and it's going to be. They always, how much is it? How much am I getting? That was the first ones who ever said I have to be paid for the rehearsal. Now, I'm telling you, this is long ago.
Yeah.
They were the first ones to drop you because they got a better gig or they were paying it. Now, I'm also looking at it from their perspective. This guy went 1-2 years to school, probably has incurred a lot of debt because of that, and has to make a buck.
John, I guarantee he's got a load of debt. It's a guarantee.
Yeah.
That guy's carrying those on his shoulders, as well as a huge keyboard back in the day, as well as a Leslie back in the day. So these guys were they were like, pay me because I'm breaking my neck just getting the gear in. So
but to what you said, I mean, these were the guys that could come in and play everything perfectly, and it sounded like a freaking computer.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there was no soul, there was nothing. It was like, oh, okay, here are the notes, and you were like, okay, well, that's great, and that's right on, but don't ask them to add anything to it. Don't ask them to do any improvisation or if you did, forget it. Then you got suddenly, I always keep using the bass players because they were always the ones that we had to bring in. That's when you get Jocko shows up all of a sudden, And it's like a 20-minute, all over the place with every string that he has and a few he doesn't.
Yeah.
So, it was always dealing with that mentality, which I think you're absolutely right, Tony. It gets beat into them. Pardon me, not to use that term, but I'm saying it's inflicted upon them that this is your job. This is what you have to do. You have to be better than everyone else.
Yep.
And it's like that movie Whiplash.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, you better do this for 7 hours and your hands better bleed or you're not doing your job. And it's like, ugh. ugh, that's just an awful, awful feeling to have. I mean, when you think about it, now, I went to school with a music major, and he went there for teaching. He was going to study to become a teacher, and he was going to go and teach, I think, at the high school level, actually, which I was like, wow, why would you do that? But whatever, we all know how much money teachers make.
Yes.
But, when you're talking about, aside from becoming Dave Grohl or somebody like that, what are your options? You have teaching. You may be playing, if you're playing a string instrument or something like that, you may be able to play in an orchestra. But you know what? There are 1,200 symphony orchestras in the United States as of 2014.
Wow.
Some of them maintain a 52-week performing season, but most of them have shorter ones. Out of that, less than 10% have a budget of $2.5 million or more. Now, mind you, wow. $2.5 million, that's not bad. But you're talking about a full-size orchestra has 50 to 100 musicians. A chamber orchestra is 50 or less. Most of these are dealing with, struggling with smaller budgets. If you're not working full-time, a full year, if you're playing in that orchestra as a musician, you're going to have to go find other work. You're going to have to teach. You're going to have to do something, maybe even work in an office or something in the off season. And those are not, these are not six-figure gigs. Maybe the conductor and maybe the leads at some of the bigger orchestras are getting six figures a year, but most of them are probably not. So this is not an industry at any level where if you're just playing, you're going to go out, you're going to go to school, you're going to incur that debt, and then you're going to go out and you're suddenly going to make your nut. It just, it doesn't work like that at any level,
I'm just looking here. I've got a little list here of people that can and did read. So top of my list here that I put down was Sting. Now, he was a school teacher. I don't know if you know this, but he was a teacher, obviously, prior to the police kicking off. Now, you kind of get the idea that guy can read because where he went with Fragile and songs like that, when he started to do solo stuff, it's pretty intricate stuff. And I got to be honest, it's beautifully played.
Yeah.
You've got Phil Collins. He sounds like he read a little bit.
Yeah.
Lady Gaga. Now that's smart. Smart. She, she turned, obviously, what she knows the theory, obviously, but she turned it into pop superstardom, which is pretty clever. I'm sure she didn't do it on her own. In fact, I know she didn't do it on her own. But she knows the back end. But you can also include Karen Carpenter. James Brown knew how to read.
Oh yeah.
He also knew how to do drugs, but that's another story. and of course, Les Paul, God bless him.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that guy, what couldn't he do, by the way?
Yeah, well, Les Paul, I mean, when you have a guitar named after you, I think you've earned your stripes.
Well, he did everything. I mean, the guy invented basically slapback delay. I mean, he was just a genius. The multi-track recording, it just doesn't end with him. That's another story for another time, obviously.
Yeah.
But going back to your situation where one of your family members is is it a brass section that he's in or an orchestra?
He's a trumpet player, so I think he's doing, modern type music and modern arrangements and that sort of thing.
Those guys work all of the time.
Yeah.
I've done enough albums and enough sessions to watch these players come in, and there's always the one guy. You've got the four, and they're in there for one reason. They're kick ass and they get it done. They're done, and it's like wow, and it's as tight as a duck's ass. They've read that, they've looked at the dots, and they've gone bang. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
They're smashing this stuff out, but you got the one guy on the end with his watch, and he's looking, and he's desperate for that clock to go tick, and then he goes double time, and all of a sudden, these guys, there's always the one guy, and they're there for a reason. They're good, they're for good players, but they're the guy that will argue the toss and say not another note is being played unless we get paid. That's the music school type, in my mind. Yeah. In my mind, there's very, very few trumpet players and big brass players that I know that can't read.
Yeah, well, the old joke. What's the definition of an optimist? A trumpet player with a beeper. I mean, that's an old that's an old joke, but or a trombone player with a beeper. It's like in the industry from the perspective when I was playing. Yeah. Those were specialists that needed to be brought in only in rare occasions when you had a full horn chart and you had written everything that. Now, listen, I could read the dots and I could write out the dots, and I knew knew how to read off of charts, but I was terrible. So at the performance end of it, and I wish I had never done that piece of it. If I had only stuck to producing and which I didn't even know what that was in those days, and management, I would have been I think I would probably failed still, but I would have been a little better off, and I wouldn't be where I am now, obviously. But you got to know what works for you. And by the time you're talking about going to a Berklee or going to a full program that's going to be very expensive, look, you better know what you're doing. Nobody at Berklee doesn't know how to read. Everybody at these big music schools are there because they're already the cream of the crop at their, at the high school level. Some of them even go to special high schools and such, performing arts high schools and such, because they already have been discovered and seen to that talent. So what is that going to give you then? Are you going to make the contacts necessary? I mean, think about it. Higher education was always, you learn the nuances of basically the business world, because that was the only reason to go to school for something like that. But anybody going there for art, it's such a strange environment, because the old adage, those who can't do teach, where you're going to get a failed so let's just be harsh about this, a failed musician, because nobody grew up, except for my friend that I went to school with, but not a lot of people grow up to go, I'm going to become a teacher at Berklee. Okay.
Right.
So, that's somebody who wanted it, probably went out there and tried their best and failed at it and needed to find a rebound gig. So that's the person that's going to be now judging not just your actual technical skill and your talent, but when you were talking about, Tony, the feel. What did they like about you? That feel, that little thing inside of you that gets you to bend that note the right way, to do a little bit of a delay. Yeah. And, those subtle things that make your performance unique. You want somebody else telling you can't do it like that, do it like this, or trying to make you sound the way they want you to sound, because this is a subjective business. You don't know what is going to work and what isn't until suddenly it does, and to have somebody else basically tell you yay or nay before you ever even get it out to market is crazy in my mind.
Well, I've seen those same guys, and again, I'll go back to the commercial side, where I'd co-written quite a few commercials back in the day, and instead of me playing guitar, because it all gets a bit boring, and you're writing it, you're recording it, it's just never ending. So when we had a decent budget, we'd bring in one of those guys, and I won't mention names, but the guy would come in and he would argue the toss, and I'd be like, it's a D, and he'd go, yeah, but we don't need to do the D. We need to. I'm like, no, it needs to sound like a D.
Oh my God!
And we'd be there going, and he'd be like, I'd just go, eat your Chinese food and pass me a guitar. So I'd play a D, and I'd go, there it is, and he'd be like, oh yeah, I guess it works. But it's to me, it's absolutely crazy. It really is. It's as if when you walk in day one to those schools, having not gone to those schools, this is purely subjective, by the way.
Of course.
When you walk in, it's as if you got those pain monitors where it goes, point to the face that shows the most pain. It's like they point to the three chords, never use an E, never use a D, never use a G.
Exactly, the original sin.
Right, that G, sir. Never use the G, never use the G.
Well, my buddy that I worked with for the entire 90s, he was my songwriting partner. We all the bands that we had, we did together. He was a guitar player. I swear to God, if he could have sewn two more fingers on his left hand, he would have, because look at the chords I can play now. It was like everything was dominant this and fifth of that and whatever. All the craziest variations. It was just as you said. It was never a D. And the biggest insult he could ever say was, oh, it's a blues.
Right.
He hated blues. He hated, and I'm not talking about like, B.B. King, flashy, trashy kind of blues. Right. Any blues. He hated Led Zeppelin. He hated all the old blues players, except, the really old, like Robert Johnson and that, of course. But he just had no room for that, because it's like, I want to play like Pat Martino. I want to play like these really adventurous chords, and he wrote wonderful compositions. He was a great composer. Right. Couldn't write a lyric to save his life. If you tried to hearing his lyrics was like, scratching nails on a chalkboard, but he was an amazing player, and he taught me everything that I knew, because I hadn't learned anything prior to that.
Oh, that's funny.
So, but he was the guy who was like, well, we have to do it this way, or we have to make it a little more adventurous and that sort of thing. And I was like, maybe let's just make a simple song that I don't care if it's just easy chords, but let's get some good melodies and good lyrics and then go from there. Now, one piece of of this that I do want to throw in, I know we're getting toward the end here.
Yeah.
We're again, everyone, we're talking about the American market and maybe like say Western European as well. But we're talking about the marketplace where you don't have much support. Now, I have a friend, the guy that I used to work with, and I did a little managing for him. He was a guitar player.
Yeah.
And he would tour, he was a jazz guitarist. He would tour Europe, but primarily Netherlands. And in Netherlands, you can go over there, they will put you up, and all you have to do is do some teaching. So he would show up, he would go to the jazz school or the music schools and such and do some teaching. He'd get paid for that by the government.
Awesome.
And then he would go play his club gigs. And, they were all intertwined. Often the clubs over there would have a music school attached to them.
Wow.
So when you talk about support, it makes it a little better, and I think it makes it a little more, even keeled, so to speak, than here where it's all, absolute cutthroat. And I'm not, don't yell at me, all the people who hate socialism and all that sort of thing. I'm not advocating for that, but I'm saying in the environment in which we live, let's talk about something here in the West. In Canada, there's a band called Godspeed You Black Emperor. It's a great band. They do wonderful music, but all their compositions are like 16, 20 minutes long.
Right.
There's like 8 people on stage. You couldn't do that in the United States, or if you did, you'd better have a lot of money behind you, or somebody better be independently wealthy.
Exactly.
Because there's no way you're going to survive doing that and trying to eke out a living. None of their stuff is commercially, quotes, commercially viable,
Yeah.
because it's an 18-minute long song and it's a lot of drony stuff. But their stuff is terrific, and they sell out all their shows.
Yeah.
But, that kind of lifestyle is not coming out of heavy-duty schooling. It's coming out of, you have the talent, you find the people, you do that hard work to create, and if you get a little bit of study and a little bit of education and stuff to go with that, great. But to try and do that traditional route of I'm going to go to a 2 or 4 year school and really focus on this, and I'm going to come out of there and I'm going to play like genius musicians and such like that, and thinking that that's going to translate into a lucrative career, I just don't think that model works.
It's interesting because in the US, the one big band of that kind of ilk, that like 20-minute, is the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. That does gangbusters. Christmas time comes around. It's like they make enough money for the kids to get Christmas presents for the next 50 years. It is a license to print cash, but those guys work hard and they're fantastic at it, and they bring it every single night. I think it starts in October and it doesn't end till the end of January, and they are battering it out every night, and they are brilliant, John. I don't know if you've seen that show, but they are the American boys, and they are absolutely they're the Malmsteens playing Christmas songs, and it's close your eyes and it's snowing. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. Look, again, as normal, mate, we could go on forever, you know that, and
yes, of
that's
course.
That's why we're going to break it up into weekly segments, because if we don't, they're never going to get us off. It's just one of those things. It's a joy as always to have you on with me, John. I mean, I'm loving this, mate, and I really hope our audience is growing with us. I want to say thank you, John. Thank you to the listening audience. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and come and follow us at musicmindspodcast.com. John Stone, you're a hero.
All right, you too, Tony. Thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.